Hello, everyone. Okay, I see lots of people logging in. It's going to take a while for everybody to get in. So, hi there, welcome. Let's start by putting in the chat message where you're participating from today, what state, city, and how long you have been a paralegal and what practice area you're in. That'll give us a good idea. You can chat with each other. You can do that in the chat box. And lots of people logging in. So I'm just going to wait a few minutes to get started. We have a couple hundred people trying to get in right now. So, hi, Karen. Good to see you again. I recognize you. Hi, Melanie. Alyssa. Hi, Vanessa. Portland, Oregon. Oh, my Alexa just heard me. She just keeps saying, what would you like to play next? So I apologize for that. Welcome, Christy. Hi there. Jasmine, I might have to occasionally put on my cheaters to be able to see some of these small prints, but I don't like the light shining against it. So, okay, we've got lots of people joining. Hi, Jessica. For those just joining, we're just all kind of jumping in and introducing ourselves, what practice area you're working in, and where you're participating from. Hi, Cheryl. Okay, so we're going to get started. I know we've got some people joining in, but we are recording this. The recording's already started. So anybody who's jumping in right now, introduce yourself in the chat, and you can go back and listen to the beginning of the recording, but all we've been doing is just chatting right now. So welcome. I know a lot of you are on your lunch hour, and so I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to get myself off video and pull up a PowerPoint in just a minute, but I did want to introduce myself by video, and I'll come back on video during the Q&A. So my name's Ann Pearson. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and director of training here at the Paralegal Bootcamp. So I've been doing this about 12 years now, and it's been 30 years that I've been in the legal industry. So just like all of you, I was a litigation paralegal for many, many years. My entire professional life has been spent working in law firms. And after many years of being a litigation paralegal, I was a paralegal manager for years. And that's kind of where the Paralegal Bootcamp got started. I call it the training bug bit me. And I realized I liked training paralegals a lot more than I liked the HR side of things, and a lot better at it too. So anyways, I've been doing this for about 12 years. And today's presentation is really, it comes from, well, it's an excerpt actually. It's like a 30 to 40 minute excerpt from our litigation bootcamp that just launched yesterday. And so some of you may already be enrolled in that. And if you are, this is just an excerpt of that. Obviously, that course is 15 hours, so we can't do a 15-hour webinar for lunch. All right, so let me get started. We are going to talk about 3 key areas for success early in your career. And it comes from a framework that I developed years ago when I developed the Litigation Bootcamp. Because back in the day when I was a paralegal manager, obviously I was tasked with hiring and finding good talent, but also recognizing that there was a whole pool of talent out there that were entry-level paralegals or recent graduates from a paralegal certificate program, and there wasn't any real training in place. And so if you're in that position, actually give a shout out in the chat. If you're in the position where you've been hired as a litigation paralegal or any paralegal, you started your job and you literally sat down at your desk and went, what do I do now? What am I supposed to be doing? They didn't tell me what I'm supposed to be doing in school. They just told me, you know, legal terminology and things like that. So yeah, we were all there. I promise you, you are not alone. And so that's really my mission at the Paralegal Bootcamp. And one of the reasons I named that company, so we have lots of different boot camps. You know, we have the litigation paralegal boot camp, we have the personal injury boot camp, we have the trial prep boot camp, the e-discovery boot camp. They're all named boot camp, but the company itself, the Paralegal Bootcamp, the name comes from me understanding the challenge of a new paralegal starting out and knowing you're already working 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And, to go to an 8-hour conference where you have to sit and hope that you get a little nugget of information when you leave. I did that throughout my career and was frustrated with it. Every senior paralegal will tell you that, that was not the best way to try to get the training that you needed. And so all of our courses are developed with that mindset that give them as much information in as little as time as possible. So if I can give you a ton of information in 30 or 40 minutes, and we have 10 or 15 minutes remaining, and you have questions, fine. If this goes past an hour and there are more questions, I'll stay on as long as you want to. But the thing that I will never do is waste a paralegal's valuable time. All right, so let me get started, share the screen. A couple of just, I guess, technical things that you might want to keep in mind. If you send something through the chat box, you probably know, but you have the option to change that drop down so that the message only comes to me if you prefer to, if you have a question that you don't want others to see. And you have the option to use the Q&A box and select anonymous if you don't want your name used. But otherwise, I'll assume if your name's on there and it went to everyone that you're okay with me, saying your name out loud. Okay, let's get started. Let's see here. Okay, let me get my face off here so you've got it full screen. Okay. Hi, Kim from Minnesota. Good to see you. Okay. You should have the screen now available to you. Let me just pull up the screen here. Okay. So this is what I like to talk about and tell as many paralegals as possible. And that is that you don't have to wait decades to be what's called a quote rockstar paralegal. It doesn't even have to be 10 years from now. You could be making 6 figures well before year 10. I'll tell you, I was, and that was my year 10 was like 2000, year 2000. Yeah, I started in 92. Well, so 2002. And that was 20 years ago. And this is, even if you're just starting your career. Now, I'm not saying if you're just starting your career, you're going to make $100,000, but you can be a rock star paralegal now. And I'm going to dispel that myth and talk about how you can do that, the 3 key areas to focus on. So first, if you can, go ahead and shut off your cell phone, your distractions, shut down those 20 other tabs that you've got open on your computer, close your door if you have one, whatever you need to stay focused. And I promise you, you'll get valuable information and some motivation coming out of today. Like I said, I am recording this and the replay will be available for a short period of time. Heather will send out a replay email or message to everybody. So just in case you have to jump off, which I know can happen, right? You planned on attending, but all of a sudden the attorney knocks on your door in 20 minutes and has an emergency. I'm well aware that that could be possible. So let's first make sure you're in the right place, because like I said, I don't want to waste anybody's time. You are, if you're new or fairly new to litigation, say, 5 years, maybe 10 years and under, and you don't want to wait a decade to see success in your career. Now, this might not be for you if you can, if you think that we're going to give you a result today, that you're going to walk away and tomorrow, be able to make $100,000. And this is not about money. I'm just using that as a general figure. Or if you're not prepared to put some work in, because I'm going to give you a bunch of information that you're going to have to use either as a checklist, stuff that I put inside the litigation bootcamp that I show people. And so some of it's going to be, all right, here's these 9 areas that I'm going to focus on. I got to put some work in to be able to do that. So let me start with that question for you, similar to what I asked. I'm going to be a little bit more specific this time. Put it in the chat. You can just type a big yes or absolutely, whatever, emoji you want to put in there. If any of these sound familiar to you, you thought they were going to train you. Your mentor that they assigned to you took you to lunch your first day and you haven't seen them since. The attorneys don't explain things to you. Okay, lots of lots of chats and comments. So, like I said in the beginning, you're not alone. It's not unique to you. It's not unique to your firm or the attorneys that work for you. If you listen to my podcast, I tell paralegals that one thing we have to try to remember is that attorneys aren't trainers. They are lawyers and they want to practice law. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get some of that, training, but understanding that. And so if you're feeling frustrated, like, what am I going to do? Nobody's showing me how to do this. I'm just trying to figure it out on my own. You're not alone. So in other words, here's what happens. And I'm saying this because if you're a paralegal with 10 or more years of experience on the call, you can relate, and maybe you can add in the chat that this is what happens. You learn by trial and error, and you hope that the mistakes don't cause you to lose your job. With each mistake, you start to wonder if you're cut out to be a paralegal. And you don't want to bother people by asking too many questions. So you just try to figure it out on your own. So like I said, what I'm going to talk about today is essentially a 30 to 40 minute excerpt of the 15-hour program that opened for enrollment yesterday. And I recognized some of the people in the chat box that you already have enrolled in the course, which is great. So you could say, well, it's a 30 to 40 minute excerpt of what's in the course. So it's up to you if you still want to attend, but if you have other urgent things to do, you're going to find what we're going to talk about today inside that course. So you could jump over when module 1 comes out. It's actually 30 to 40 minutes of what's in module 1, and module 1 takes about 2 hours or so to get through. So obviously module 1's a little bit more comprehensive. All right, so let's get started. And first I want to say where and how this came about. This is an actual copy of a picture that my content manager put out there some time ago. It was on social media. It was when I was starting to record the full litigation boot camp for the January launch. So it only comes out twice a year, in January and in June. And I was starting to record it, and I thought, oh, you know what? So she snaps a picture and it just has this on the blackboard. It absolutely does not have to take you a decade or two to become a rockstar litigation paralegal. But then, one of the comments in there was, I'm struggling. It was this in social media, and the other paralegals won't help me. Or I would see and hear online senior paralegals saying, well, I had to figure it out myself, so they can too. And so I said, no, it absolutely does not have to take a decade or two. I wanted to let new paralegals know. How do I know that? Because I've seen it firsthand. I know so many paralegals who at their 5-year mark are outperforming other paralegals who have 20 years of experience. It is possible, and it doesn't take a decade or two. And so these social media comments, were pretty harsh, well, they got to figure it out. I did too. That's where my motivation comes from. Now, let me start by telling a story. In fact, the story is actually these 2 paralegals that I hired, and kind of, I would almost say that that's what led me into entrepreneurship. So it was around 2005. I was a paralegal manager trying to figure out how to hire paralegals for a team that could only bill their paralegals at $65 an hour because of client billing restrictions. But the attorneys wanted me to find them a paralegal with the experience level of a $70,000 a year paralegal. And I ran the numbers and said, it's just not possible. You can't be profitable when you're paying somebody that much money and you can only bill them out at $65 an hour. So I convinced them, kicking and screaming, to let me hire 2 entry-level paralegals, and I would personally train them from the ground up, because I knew the senior paralegals were too busy or they just wouldn't be able to show them the level that they were going to need. And because I really wanted it to work. So I developed this 1-year training program that showed them how to do everything that I knew, absolutely everything about managing litigation cases. We met once a week and took a real case that the firm had from the complaint to the trial and everything in between. I developed checklists for them and all of that. So they are literally coming into the firm with no paralegal experience. In fact, one of them didn't even have a paralegal certificate. She only had a college degree. She'd never gone to a paralegal certificate program. And you know what happened? Within 2 to 3 years, those attorneys were calling those paralegals rock stars. It didn't take 10 or 20 years to get them there. It just took the right kind of training. So fast forward to 2010, after putting several more paralegals through that internal program, I decided this is what I really enjoy about being a paralegal manager and not so much the HR side of it. And I thought, well, if I could do this for these paralegals, maybe I could do it for more paralegals, throughout the country. And that's what started the Paralegal Bootcamp. So I have to thank Laura and Alex for that. They were my first 2 hires that I did that with. And so why not wait for that paralegal down the hall to show you how to be a great paralegal? Because it's never going to happen. Either one, they don't have the time, they have good intentions, but they're just too busy. And it's not their job, right? You probably understand that if you've been working now for any short period of time, that as a paralegal, litigation, and I'm going to talk litigation here because this is the litigation masterclass, but as a litigation paralegal, you're busy. Could you imagine trying to take an hour out of your day or even an hour or 2 a week to train somebody else when your job is to manage those litigation cases? And even if they had the time, just because they're a great paralegal doesn't mean they know how to show you how to be a great paralegal. And then third, which is the one I like the least, and I like saying the least, but I have to say it because it's out there, it's somewhat pervasive in our industry, and that is they might have a scarcity mindset. So the scarcity mindset comes from someone who hoards resources like knowledge, maybe because of fear that they can't be at the top if others are too. You've probably heard of this, right? It's kind of like you mistake it for, being the top hitter in a baseball team, right? You want the best score. You want to be able to make sure you hit harder and faster than the person on the opposite team. The thing is, we're not on opposite teams. I actually did a podcast episode on this and went into more detail if you're interested. So I have a podcast called Paralegals on Fire and with Ann Pearson. So it's not setting paralegals on fire. Obviously, it's, we'll go back to the baseball analogy. It's okay when someone says, boy, that hitter was on fire, or that quarterback was on fire for that game. That's what it is. I believe it was episode 14, but if you go to just search paralegal podcast, and I'm sure it'll come up on the first page of Google. Here's a screenshot that I took inside a paralegal group. Yep, that happens. So don't post things inside paralegal groups and think that it's okay because it's a private group. But I did it because when I read this, I thought, man, it still happens like this. I literally took this screenshot, I want to say 2 weeks ago. So a paralegal posted about being promoted to a senior paralegal position, and she's been assigned an assistant to help her, which she's super excited about, a recent graduate from a paralegal school. And here were just two of the comments. The first one, congratulations. Be careful training that student too well. You don't want them to become your replacement. And someone else agreeing with that comment. Then another one, be careful they're not getting you to train somebody to take your job. But even without that, and that's, that can be here, and there, but take away that and say, okay, maybe it's not that bad of a situation. Maybe it's not scarcity. It would be nice to blame the schools or to blame the senior paralegals who won't train you or the attorneys who won't show you the time. But here, I just literally copied and pasted this morning because I looked up in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm sorry if it's a little blurry. It was literally a little screenshot and I had to open it up there. Send me in the Q&A if you want to know what those numbers actually say, what the median pay is. But it says, notice it says typical entry-level education, associate's degree, on-the-job training. What's it say there? None. This is in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, on-the-job training, none. So I clicked on that little question mark to pull up this box, and this says additional training needed post-employment to attain competency in the skills needed in this occupation. So the question is not so much, did I get a thorough education, or, what am I doing that's wrong or right? It is, how am I going to get additional training? So my goal for you, for every paralegal, it's seriously one of my missions, is that I want every single paralegal to break through every possible ceiling that has ever been set for the paralegal profession. Not just in money, but one of those is money. So let's talk about the 3 keys to focus on. And we're gonna focus on mindset, but we got to look at the 3 keys that you're going to have to also talk about. So these are the 3 keys. The reason why I pulled skills out a little bit from that circle is that the problem I see too often is that people just focus on skills. I can tell you in the last 30 years, I've met a lot of paralegals who had excellent skills. They weren't rockstar paralegals, and they weren't seeing the same success as other paralegals who had less skills. The problem in focusing on just one of these areas, like skills, for example, is that mindset that makes you think it's going to take years to gain those skills, years of experience in order to gain those skills, and then I'll be successful. I'm telling you, it doesn't have to, but it does take all 3. And notice how education is not on here. That's because, as you know, if you're working as a litigation paralegal, they don't teach you how to be a litigation paralegal in any paralegal certificate program. Yeah, there's a civil lit class, maybe legal writing and legal research, maybe a class on torts, but they don't teach you how to be a great litigation paralegal. And the other thing is, there are plenty of successful paralegals out there with no certificate. Now, I'm not advocating that at all, that someone should not get a paralegal certificate, not at all. Because I think it will limit your job opportunities if you don't get one. But what I am saying is, where you got your certificate from and what they taught you in the program is not key to determining your success as a litigation paralegal. Like I said, that one paralegal that I hired in that group of 2, one of them didn't even have a paralegal certificate. And she was gone on, so I left in 2010. It's been another 12 years. She was already super successful before I left in 2010. So, her career has skyrocketed since then. No paralegal certificate. So it's not about that, but you have to have all 3. It can't just be about skills. This is the framework that I developed when I developed the Litigation Paralegal Bootcamp. And it has these 3 key areas to focus on. And within each of these 3, this is when I started developing the curriculum and saying, all right, well, what about mindset? Like if I had to pick 3 major areas, obviously there are others, but 3 critical areas around mindset. And that is that you own your cases, you own your career, and the mindset that you can be a rockstar paralegal now, not later. And when I talk about behaviors, I'm talking about being proactive, both with your cases and your career, paying attention to detail, and mastering time management, because we all know in litigation, there's only a certain amount of time. And then with skills. So leveling up your trial prep skills, sharpening your technology skills, and mastering the discovery phase. I'm going to pull up another screen so that you can actually read it a little bit easier than those. I know that that's a little bit small print, but it's all 3 of these areas. And if you miss one, it's going to take you longer. I'm not saying you won't ever be a successful paralegal, but why wait 10 or 20 years? Why take that route just because you see it online, just because other paralegals say, well, it took me 30 years to get there or 20 years to get there. That was in the 90s, right? I started my career in 1992. If I was to sit here and say, it took me 30 years to get there, so you just need to put in the years of experience, it's not the 90s. Someone, I hope, would say to me, well, it's not the 90s anymore, Ann. It's 2022. So all 3 of these, you could have the skills, like I said, and if you don't have the right mindset and you don't have the right behaviors, it's not going to work. If you have the mindset and the behaviors, but you don't have the skills, it's not going to work. So let's talk about mindset. This is the first part of that Venn diagram. I'll tell you that I had a very successful career as a paralegal. And in fact, for all of those out here who are attending today, who are just starting, say in your first few years, I'm jealous, I'm envious. I wish I could go back and do it all over again. I just really enjoyed my career working as a litigation paralegal. And I was working on some of the biggest, most challenging cases out there, not in my first year or 2, but shortly. I was working for a very large firm, and I was the partner's right-hand person. He relied on me more than the team of associates that were also put on his cases. By the time I was in my 8th year, I was already making 6 figures, if you included the typical $10,000 to $15,000 performance bonus that I'd get at the end of the year. And that was around the year 2000, 2001, I guess. So more than 20 years ago. I don't know what the equivalent to that would be today. I'm sure one of you's out there on one of your other screens Googling right now, what's the 2022 equivalent to 100,000 in 2001? If you are, throw that in the chat and let everybody know. But, and this is a big but, I could have done so much better, so much quicker, if someone would have told me about how important mindset is to a successful career. Back in the 90s, no one was talking about mindset. And if you're thinking, oh no, not another foo-foo talk about thinking positive or putting out positive affirmations and these great things are randomly going to come my way, please stick with me. I'm not talking about that when I refer to mindset. What I'm saying is having the mindset of, no, it does not have to take me decades of experience. I need mindset, behaviors, and skills. So thinking, okay, that's what I have. And when I refer to rockstar paralegal, I'm using the term kind of generally, and your definition might be something different than mine. To me, it's someone who is at the top of their game, working on cases that are challenging and rewarding. They're highly respected professionals, both at work and maybe within the legal community, the local legal community. And yes, usually with that comes the money. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to make more money and also be happy at work. That can happen at the same time. But it could mean something else to everyone else. Like I know a paralegal who I worked with who her idea of all of that was, yep, I want to work on stuff that's challenging and rewarding. I want to be highly respected, but instead of getting a big old raise, I want to cut my hours and be allowed to work part-time so I can pick my kids up at school. Yeah. So, throw in the chat box what would being a rock star paralegal look like for you? And maybe add to it if you already feel like, well, I'm already doing all that. My career is skyrocketed. I'm happy, can't go any higher than this. Then put that in the chat box too. I'm actually going to open up the Q&A for a second, the Q&A box, because I see a couple of questions in here. Will you be sending along a link to the presentation later? Yes, there will be a replay. It takes a while for Zoom to convert it over to the right kind of file, and then we have to upload it to the replay page. But if not this afternoon, then definitely by the morning. Here's a question from Anonymous. I'm afraid that working in a boutique law firm will limit my growth. I don't want to leave because I have the best team and attorneys are eager to grow. So I know there is potential. I feel like I've outgrown my pay, but I'm afraid to demand what I deserve because I'm afraid the firm is not there yet. What are your thoughts? Ooh, good question. I'll bet other people have that too. So first of all, I would never suggest that you leave, that the grass is not always greener. I'll tell you a little secret. Well, it's not going to be a secret after hundreds of people hear this, but I had, in my first couple of years, right out of school, I was a litigation paralegal and I got amazing experience because this attorney never settled a case. So I went to so many trials and got such great experience. And I mean, he had me doing all of his work. And I got annoyed when I found out what other paralegals were making. Now, they had been there longer than me, but I got annoyed and I felt like I should be making more money. And I was going to be moving to Atlanta, in like a year. This is when I was in Florida, Sarasota. And I interviewed at another firm and they paid me, I want to say it was at least a $5,000 jump, right? And this is so probably 1994, 95 maybe. And I went just so I could make that extra money in the year before moving to Atlanta. And you know what? I was miserable. I was so miserable. It was the worst decision I ever made. And so I want to tell that story because if you're happy where you're at, then I wouldn't necessarily want to make a move just for the money. That being said, one thing I have to tell you, working at a boutique law firm, I don't think that's going to limit your growth. I work with a lot of boutique law firms that it amazes me. They spend money on training with me that some of the big firms don't even spend. They are not afraid to drop money to enroll their paralegals in all kinds of my courses and give them training. And they're paying them really well and they're getting really good work. It might take some time. Maybe we'll cover this a little bit later in the Q&A if you want, or you could reach out to me separately. But I think what you should do is do some research on how to approach them asking for more money, because I've seen a lot of stuff on LinkedIn recently where people are doing that and saying, I just feel like I should be making more money, and present your case. In fact, I think there was I'll try to find it and send it to you if you email me separately with your name. Thank you, Anonymous. Okay, in the chat. Oh, Maria, that's a good Okay, to Maria, rockstar would be to pick up a case from start to end, also to be able to do research and writing. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back through the chat. I promise you, when we have time at the end, I want to get to make sure I get to all three of these mindsets. And I know we're running short, so let's jump in. Mindset number 2. So first one, it doesn't take years of experience. Second one, you have to take ownership of your career. And that means investing in it. And so I'm not going to, I know we're running short already. We've only got like 25 minutes left, but Google the story on Sharpen the Saw, or look up what is Stephen Covey's 7th habit. And it is to sharpen the saw, because if you don't continually invest in your career and do things that are going to sharpen the saw, eventually the blade is so dull that it takes you 3 times as long to get something done. And it's not just, learning about technology, it's looking at everything. And, I will tell you that investing in your career is the best thing that you will ever do. If you don't already follow my podcast, go to the Paralegal podcast page on my website. It's paralegal-bootcamp.com. At the very bottom of the footer, it'll say Paralegal Podcast, and it'll send you to the page with all the episodes. There's an episode on there. I think it was one of the first few that I did, and it's titled, "It's Not About Job Security, It's About Career Security." And I go into detail there. But here's the other thing. I see this too often. So a paralegal goes and gets certified through one of the national organizations, and they have to get a certain amount of CLE credits every year. So instead of focusing on adding skills or changing behaviors or changing mindset, instead of that, you just get focused on, I need a CLE credit every time I attend something. Instead, here's a perfect example, a CLE credit. You're like, oh, I need 2 more credits. So you take an hour webinar from a judge on how to interpret Rule 26B and the case law associated with it, which, okay, that's nice to know, but is it adding a skill to your paralegal skill set? Instead, you could have spent that hour watching a YouTube video lesson on how to maybe use the VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel to make it easier when you do XYZ. The only problem is you don't get a certificate from watching a YouTube video lesson. Now, what I love, absolutely love about everyone attending today is you're attending today because you wanted to invest in your career without getting a CLE certificate for attending. So kudos. And even though we only have about half of the 200, I think there were around 200 and some people registered, not one of you sent an email in asking if there was going to be a CLE certificate for attending today's 1-hour webinar. So I think that's awesome. And I think this actually is probably the first time that's ever happened. So I'm already impressed, super impressed. Okay, so what I would suggest, and I can put, I could put a link, I could send it to you by email, but instead, if you go to that Paralegal podcast page for the career security, I believe that this Excel file is a download that you can download on that episode page. And so it's just a spreadsheet. You could put this together yourself and say, okay, what category of the investment do I want to make? How am I going to get it? What time is going to be needed? When, like set a goal on when, what's the cost involved? Is it something I could get reimbursed for? And when it was completed, and then notes. And just keep track of it every year so that you're constantly doing things and making yourself a list. Because we all know if we don't write it down, it's going away. So tell me in the chat or the Q&A if you want to keep it private. What's one thing that you could put on your to-do list for this week? Today's Wednesday, that you could invest in your career, and not in addition to this thing that we're doing. What's one thing? It could be a 15-minute, this one thing that's hard for you to figure out in Excel, or maybe it's the table of authorities in Microsoft Word, or it's something related to e-discovery. What's one thing you could do, even if it's only 15 minutes, that you could say, I'm going to do that before the end of this week? I'm going to jump into the chat in a minute, but I don't want to run too late. Okay, so mindset number 3. Take ownership of your cases. Kind of micro, we're like going down to the micro level. So first it's ownership of your career, then it's ownership of your cases. Now, in order to do that, this is one of the questions I get asked most often. Well, how? What do I do? Most of you joining today probably got notice of this masterclass after requesting a copy of our 3-step roadmap. It's a PDF. And that gave you 3 steps to help you get to know your cases better. Because in order to take ownership of your cases, you have to know every single thing that's going on in those cases. And so if you didn't get that, let me know, and I can include, when we get to the Q&A, I'll include a link at the end of this with the PDF. I just have to go search through the computer. Or here's a way you can get it too. The URL is paralegal-bootcamp.com/3 steps, the number 3, STEPS. So get yourself a copy of that. It's a written version. So it gives you, 3 steps to be able to get to know your cases better. And it's one of the fundamentals that I teach and take a deep dive into in our litigation paralegal bootcamp, both in the behaviors section and the skills section. That's how important it is. All right, I want to show you another thing you could do in addition. So you've got that spreadsheet, right? Maybe you just want to focus first on mindset. And, the 3 mindsets that we talked about today: be the rockstar paralegal now, the mindset that you own your career and that you own your cases. And maybe pull your phone out, take a snapshot of this and say, all right, each day I'm going to do this, each month I'm going to do this, each quarter, and what my end of the year goal is, or things that I'm going to stop doing or avoid doing. For example, one of the things that I would suggest, if you are a new paralegal, stop calling yourself a newbie. I hate when I see that. I hate it because if you think about it, so newbie is kind of a derogatory term that came about from like gamers, like they were a newbie gamer just from years ago. It's the first time like that I've heard about it. But when I see that and I hear more senior paralegals maybe saying, they're in a conversation with an attorney and they're saying, yeah, the newbie paralegal did this, or let's give it to the newbie paralegal. No, you can't stop them from saying it. Or you could correct them and say, you could just call me the paralegal. But because I think sometimes you have to look at things that you're doing that are going to make it harder and harder for you to get this mindset. What things are you doing that are going to prevent you from having the mindset that you own your career? So that could be that final column. Okay, so this is a really long testimonial from Sarah, but it's worth the read. And this is why I mean, like, nobody is alone in this. So we've got the 3 areas to focus on: skills, mindset, and behavior. And we covered the mindset today, or at least a brief one. This is worth the read because, well, first of all, not a lot of people write that lengthy of testimonials for us. Some of them, I probably got maybe a handful, maybe 10 or 15. But the way she described it, right, is when she says, how shall I put this? Really just not knowing what my job is supposed to be, trying to reinvent the wheel without confirmation of whether I'm doing it correctly. Yeah, hand raise if that's you. On the job training has meant I'm going to make my best guess under pressure with little or no guidance. And that's been hard for me because I care deeply about doing good work. I mean, we all do. We all care about doing good work. And so that's where the struggle comes in. So when you're asking yourself, or you're stressed about, doing it right. You can kind of be proud of the fact that you probably do care deeply about doing good work. And yeah, you also don't want to be reprimanded, right? Or take the chance that you're going to lose your job. But here's another thing I want to point out. This is an actual screenshot, actual page that I copied from a textbook that's being used in a paralegal certificate program right now, not in the civil litigation class. This is the litigation specialty class, which someone has to pay extra for to get that leg up on getting a job as a paralegal. And this is why Sarah said it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle without a picture on the box. Throughout the book, they would put a table in there. So imagine you've got the left side of the page says this, the right side said this, right? And you would think, well, while the attorney is working on ... then it's going to tell me, because it says you might assist by ... While the attorney is working on drafting or reviewing requests for admission and interrogatories, you might assist by drafting ... Like, what does this mean? What do all these mean? There's no picture here, right? Especially, as a new paralegal, how are you supposed to know what you should be doing when they're drafting documents? This says drafting documents. So does that mean you should be drafting them, or you're drafting other documents? And if so, how would you know which ones? Organizing responses received. Well, while they're drafting them, okay, maybe they meant to say you could assist afterwards. I don't know. But as I went through every one of these, I thought to myself, it's not gotten any better. In 30 years, there is still no comprehensive thing out there that says, here's how you draft the documents. Here's how you organize the responses. Here's why it's important. And so if you're like Sarah, do not be kicking yourself, because it wasn't your school, it wasn't that you went to a bad school. It's just vague, right? It's just vague on what it is that's expected of you. All right, so I know we're coming close. So I do want, obviously there's two options, right? You can wait for them to show you, or, well, there's actually a third option. So option 2 would be follow a proven roadmap, which I have in the litigation bootcamp. Or option 3, you could very well try to piece things together from YouTube. There's a lot of free content out there. I put out free content on my podcast. I'm starting to do YouTube channels, Google, Facebook groups for paralegals, but you run the risk of being in the same place for next year and next year and next year, just minus hundreds of hours of going down that rabbit hole of searching for tips. And, the other thing that I will tell you, because I have this course, right? This litigation bootcamp is a course that I sell. And so, yes, I put out content, bits and pieces to help people, to give them something. But if I was giving you all of the content that I put inside the Litigation Paralegal Bootcamp, then no one would buy the course and I'd be out of business. And I wouldn't be able to sit and record podcast episodes that help you, right? But I'm not saying that you should enroll in the course. Maybe your firm won't reimburse you. What I am saying is take this framework, take a screenshot with your phone and say, all right, what can I do? There are things out there that you can do little by little each day that would get you those 3 areas. It just will take you a little bit longer is all. It's not, it's not me saying you have to take my course. But I am saying you have to do something, whether it's finding some of the information out there for free or finding something similar, that's maybe not as, expensive as mine. Or maybe it's asking, I did an interview with a paralegal manager and I'm excited. It's going to come out a couple, maybe 2 or 3 episodes from now on the podcast. And it's interesting. There was a theme where she has said, like, sometimes you just have to ask, whether it's ask for the opportunity and maybe to the question from the anonymous person, ask for that raise. You know, what's the worst they can do? Say no, right? They're not going to fire you. Most likely they're not. And even if they did, I'm going to tell you, it's the best economy to be fired in. I get emails from people all the time. So I'm not saying that you should want to get fired. I'm just saying now's the time to ask if you're going to ask. So in the boot camp, I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to jump over and go back on camera for Q&A. But yes, I did get the question of how long does it take and all that. So let me just tell you real quick. It is, it's 12 weeks of live coaching, but it's a self-paced course. So you start it, one module gets released every week. And then every other week I'm live for coaching. And so module 1 is the mindset, and it's not just what we talked about today. It's a little over 2 hours for module 1. So obviously I don't just talk about the 3 things that we talked about today. I go into a deep dive on mindset. And then behaviors, and then the pleadings and motions phase of a litigation case, the discovery phase, trial prep skills, which comes from our trial prep boot camp, and technology skills. I know this boot camp isn't for everyone. What I'm begging of you is, if you are struggling, that if you don't get it from me, get it somewhere. So let me show you what I mean. Pull out your phones and you can take screenshots of these. And I'm going to give you everything that's in the course, and you can do if you need to be able to do it and find the free stuff out there. And then you'll have kind of a checklist. As you can tell, I'm big on checklists. Okay, so with module 1, mindset, problem solving, mind shifting model, not letting others determine or limit your success, project management skills, the confidence to speak up. And so you literally could turn these 5 things, if you're not going to be a part of the course, turn these 5 things into a checklist and say, this month I'm going to focus, or maybe this quarter, I'm going to focus on mindset, and I'm going to find every article I can about problem solving skills, or every podcast episode. Is it going to take you longer than the 2 hours or so to get through my part of the module for my course? Yeah, a lot longer, but it's going to be free. And that's what I want, like, for you to get the information. I don't care how you get it. The same with module 2, take a screenshot and then make these 5 things your checklist, right? How to organize things, how to know what the attorney needs before they ask for it, how to reduce last minute scrambles, how to be the master of time management and eliminate mistakes. In other words, attention to detail. Okay, another screenshot for you. Hopefully, maybe you can crop out the pictures, but in the pleadings and motions phase, knowing how to blue book like a pro, which is kind of cool, because one of the bonuses that I'll show you that's in this course, I partnered with a company that developed a legal technology assessment tool and a blue booking tool. And it's a bonus, it's free inside the course. And it's literally where you go through and it shows you, like, it asks you to put in a blue book citation for something that they're saying. And if it's right or wrong, like if it's right, it shows you. And if it's wrong, it shows you where it's wrong and trains you on it. And the same with Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and Adobe. All right. And then module 4 in the discovery phase, how to draft discovery, how to prepare for depositions, tracking the discovery, and deposition notebooks, and e-discovery, of course. But it's just a general, I will tell you, it's only one short module on e-discovery, because what I also did was realized that not everybody is going to work in e-discovery or need to know the detail that a lot of other litigation paralegals do. For example, if you're in personal injury. If you're in personal injury, you don't necessarily need 5 hours of e-discovery project management. So I made that a bonus course that is inside, that you have the option to take or not take. Okay. 5. If you want to get the trial prep skills, take a picture of that. Those 5 things become your checklist. And I would suggest if you are going to go the other route of, I'm going to try to find this information, I'm going to get it for myself. If you do that, I would suggest that you do it along the lines of this sequence too, because once you develop the mindset and you get that going, and then the behaviors, the skills are going to come a lot easier for you. And because it wouldn't make sense for you to start learning how to prepare for trial unless you know that you've got a trial coming up in the next 6 months or so. And then in module 6, the technology skills. And so this is where that LTA comes in, which is really cool because in Microsoft Word and Excel, it allows you to, like, it tells you to upload this document to do the task that they tell you to do. And then it tells you what went wrong, and you only have to do the training on what you actually did wrong. So if you're a master at Microsoft Excel, you're just going to fly through it. And it gives you a certificate, a credential. I think it's COBOT, certified operator of business office technology, something like that. Anyways, what's cool about that is that some firms are requiring something along those lines, either that or testing that you have to take during the interview process. And some clients are requiring it too. In other words, if they're going to hire a law firm, they want to make sure that they're being billed appropriately for that law firm. Okay, so like I said, I put the bonus of the e-discovery bootcamp separate. That's a 5-hour course, just that alone. That's why it's a bonus, because if you're a personal injury paralegal, maybe you don't want to know that much about e-discovery. Now, one thing we did last time, so this course launched in January, and then enrollment closed. One of the things that we discovered is that some personal injury paralegals were taking it, and we're glad that they didn't have to take the e-discovery bootcamp. So what we did was we substituted our personal injury bootcamp for their bonus course, because the personal injury bootcamp is all about case intake and claim file management, like pre-litigation phase of a personal injury file. And then Asana for paralegals, which is going to be a live training that I do inside there. All right, so I know we're running out of time. It's getting close to it ending. Like I said, I will stay on here for as long as you guys have questions, but I did want to show you this other one that Diane Miles wrote. And that's the thing. It needs to be more than just skills, right? Motivation, reasons for doing things a certain way, checklist, countless tips, and hard-won wisdom. And she wishes that it was what paralegal schools taught. The problem is, I will call out paralegal schools on this part, is that I think they need to hire more adjunct professors who are actual paralegals, like litigation paralegals, instead of all the judges and lawyers. But now I will tell you, I think some of it is restrictive, because I think if they're certified maybe through the ABA, they have to have a certain amount of lawyers. All right, so that is the litigation boot camp, which also comes with a 14-day money-back guarantee. Like literally no questions asked. If you get in there and in 14 days you decide this is not for me, I'm doing asbestos law and this just doesn't even relate to what I'm doing, then I give you your money back. Okay, so let me pull up myself back on the screen. I'm probably going to have to put my cheaters on to be able to read your questions. So give me just a second. Oops. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, I have to move this over here. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I might have to mute myself because I just heard the lawn guy pull up at the neighbor's house. I do this all work from home office space now, which I'm so happy about. But the dog may bark, and he barks at everything. I have all the blinds closed and stuff, but I might mute myself in the middle of an answer so that you guys don't have to hear a dog bark, but I will come back. All right, Q&A. Let's see. I've been checking out library books. This is anonymous. I've been checking out library books about paralegal studies. I'm waking up early to get my studies. This way it frees up my afternoon to hang out with my family. The reason I wanted to see this Zoom, I'm very interested in signing up for your boot camp. Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, one thing that I will say is I'm very careful about cautioning this. If you have not taken at least your civil procedures class or done some type of online so that you understand the terminology involved in civil litigation, then I wouldn't recommend the course for you, because it does kind of start off with the idea that you do have some type of basic knowledge and information. It may be just, you got to go buy a civil procedures book. They sell them on Amazon. Or just take a, whatever it is, civil procedures 101 YouTube video, but you need to understand at least the basics. And please feel free to email me afterwards if you're at all concerned. And I want to make sure that it would be right for you. Okay, let's see. Okay, so do me a favor. There are so many in the chat, there are so many chat messages in here. And a lot of them came just to me and not to everyone. So if you sent a question in early on in the chat message, could you maybe copy and paste it over into the Q&A, because I can get easier access to that and I don't want to miss anyone's question. Let's see. Yeah, lots of comments. Okay, so those were Marcia. Yes, you know what? I like that. I like that. So Marcia said no cert and no college degree either. Common sense and willingness to learn. Our team likes to use the quote, "The rising tide lifts all ships." I love that quote. You are so right. So right. And it does take a willingness to learn, for sure. Great definitions for rockstar paralegals. Great motivation, signing up for your state notary exam, doing those Microsoft Teams. Oh, you read another, okay, read another chapter in Eat That Frog. Oh, Karen, tell me about Eat That Frog. Can you get to rockstar status without changing firms? Yes, you can. I did. So besides that little blip, right, where I literally only worked at that firm for a month, besides that little blip, I only worked for 3 law firms my entire career. That's it. And got some really big raises, but I had to show what I was capable of doing. None of the big raises that I got were a result of me going to them and saying, pay me $10,000 more or I'm leaving. But it was a lot of merit based. So yeah, you don't have to leave. You get all the accolades, but those 6 figures will never be in sight here. I hope that's not the case. I do see a lot of firms like proactively giving salary increases to paralegals. Not all firms, but what I can tell you, here's the other thing I see in some of the paralegal groups, which is disheartening, but I see them say things like, they're working for a solo practitioner. And maybe if that's the case with you, Emily, maybe then you do have to think about it, but they're working for a solo practitioner making $12 an hour. And yeah, in that case, maybe that's all that solo practitioner could afford, but I would still ask for more. Do some research. Don't go in there and just ask for more, but now is the time to ask. If you can show them what you're worth, you've been there for a while and you've created value, then now's the time to ask. Yes, Melissa, you'll get a copy of the recording. If not today, then first thing in the morning, but I think Heather's got it scheduled to go out this afternoon, like around 3 or 4. Do you offer individual help with improving legal drafting in family law? I don't. I never worked in family law. We did have a family law partner at one of the firms. So no, unfortunately, I don't. But that being said, I think improving your drafting skills in general is a good thing to do, whether it's family law related or not, and it should help you. What tracking software do you use or like the most? In terms of, is that time tracking, like billable hour tracking, Melissa, or case tracking, or case management? Thank you, Mary Meyer. Let's see, Karen says that Eat the Frog is by Brian Tracy. 21 ways to stop procrastinating and get more done in less time. Yes. In fact, so one of the books on my bookshelf back here, I'm reading now, it's more for entrepreneurs, but it's called Free Time by Jenny Blake. And she teaches entrepreneurs how to do less in more time. And it's been, oh my gosh, some of the stuff in there, it's fantastic. Discovery, case management. Okay. So there's, gosh, it so depends, Melissa, on the types of cases that you're working on, because every one of them is different. For example, right, needles is great if you're in a plaintiff's personal injury firm. There's my case, there's Clio, and it also depends on what you want it to do. Some like smaller firms will want it to also track their time, right? Where when you're working on something inside that discovery case management software, it's tracking what client file you're working on. What I would suggest that you do is Capterra, I believe it is. Capterra, or is it Gardner? Yeah, probably both of them. They rate software based on what it actually does. And it's nice because they put them in a different, like a graph where you can go in and pull like what the most important things to you are. And their ratings for them are more valid than, say, looking on that software's website. Shami, I signed up yesterday, but the system did not send out a link like I was able to join live. That might explain. Oh. Actually, no, not two. So I think we had 200 registered, but about 100, but that's good to know. But actually, no, it doesn't surprise me because the average turnout rate for any webinar is around 50%. Even less for it being a free webinar because you don't have any, skin in the game. But even a paid webinar that I've done before, it surprises me. But I think they know, like, all right, if I sign up, then I'll get access to the replay and I'll watch it then. Thank you for that. All right, let me check the Q&A box, make sure there's no other questions. If you need to jump off, feel free to do that. I don't want to hold you up. Let's see, I'm a new labor and employment law paralegal with ABA certification or certificate. And my attorney is so impacted. I work at a boutique firm and the other paralegals and attorneys just don't have the time. Would this course benefit me in my niche? Labor and employment law. Oh, okay. Yes. As long as it is, you are doing the part of labor and employment where it's labor and employment litigation. Because I know that there's a distinction. We had different labor and employment departments within our litigation or our labor and employment. There's labor and employment law, where you're working with corporate clients, drafting employment agreements. And then if there are disputes about those, it would go to the labor and employment law litigation section. So if it's labor employment law litigation, yes, it'll definitely help you. Not if you're just, drafting contracts and, dealing with some mediations and things like that. My attorney is big on providing sources when asking for increases. Even though I'm a paralegal, I have non-conventional paralegal duties. How do I provide numbers and sources? Good question. And the reason why they're big on providing sources, I talk about this a lot in the Litigation Paralegal Bootcamp, is because they spent 3 years in law school being trained on how to make sure that what they were citing to was valid, right? You got to have case law, you got to have regulations, statutes, rules, you got to back up what you're saying. And so that's why they're wanting sources for increases. So one thing I would do is go to some paralegal survey sites. I would write down your duties, what you've done or what you're doing now that's different than what you were doing a year ago. And the other thing I would recommend for everybody is start keeping track of your wins, your big wins throughout the year in a journal, on a spreadsheet somewhere, because you're going to forget. So maybe you did something, you had a big client win or a trial or something in January and you were out of town, away from your family for a week. Put it in there because you want to be able to have just what you're asking for, sources. You want to remind them of what you've accomplished this year and how it's benefited them. Because at the end of the day, they're still a business owner. So, they have to be careful. They can't just willy-nilly say, yeah, let's give everybody a $20,000 raise so that they don't leave, But I would definitely go to paralegal surveys and be careful which ones you use. Make it like a NALA or NIFPA or ALS one, or the best one out there, if you can get the data through the ALA, the Association of Legal Administrators, or the IPMA, the International Practice Managers Association. Those are going to be the most valid numbers. All right, I hope that was helpful. No more questions? I think I've got everybody answered. Let me just make sure. Okay, I think I got everybody. If I missed your question, please shoot me an email. It's A Pearson, that's PEARSON, at paralegal-bootcamp.com, and I'll be happy to answer for you. Oh, got one more question coming in. I am one of Utah 12 licensed paralegal practitioners and able to provide legal advice and retain my own clients. Melissa, I would love to interview you for the podcast. I have been looking for someone who is a licensed paralegal practitioner and find out what do you do every day? I would love to, if you would be open to it. Please reach out to me. Okay, so I'm going to go on. With not being a full-blown attorney, but able to provide all services of the attorney except argue in court, how would I ask for a pay increase when so limited and new? So yeah, I think I would need to know more about that, Melissa, because I thought if you are a licensed paralegal practitioner, that technically you could have your own firm or your own company outside of a law firm. I didn't realize that licensed paralegal practitioners were working inside law firms. So how would you ask for a pay increase? I would say, assuming you have a billable hour rate, I would say, tell them that your billable rate should be higher to the clients because you're able to do more. You're essentially able to do all of those things that's worth more money for them to bill more money out and pay more money to you. Billable hours are huge. I will tell you, that's why I have the billable hour bootcamp. Billable hours are huge. And maybe that's why I got to where I was at.
And maybe it's not always possible if you're on the plaintiff side because you don't have the billable hours as leverage. But I can tell you that billable hours are huge. And if you are billing hours and you're one of those, like Melissa is questioning, then I would most definitely say, track those hours and increase them, show them year over year. Like, look how many hours I'm billing. You should increase my rate because I'm doing more. I'm valued more by the clients. And therefore, now you can afford to pay me more. Great question, Melissa. Yes, I can. Okay. Okay, yes. Yes, Melissa. I will get Heather to email you. I'm sure she's got your email. Heather's my director of operations, and set up a time to talk. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I hope, let's see, it's like, ooh, it's running a little late. I am sorry that if we ran over, and I'll send out the replay in a few hours. Have a great day. Bye for now.